if you just start creating like a single thread in Chat GPT and talking to it every day, planning your morning, talking about what you want to achieve, it will learn how you think. It will help you become your second brain where you can just dump stuff.
Now, our guest today, at just 32 years old, a doctor warned him that his intense work habits were life-threatening, telling him, look, man, you need to stop or you're going to die. For nearly 9 years, Dylan worked relentlessly, eventually reaching a point of severe burnout in 2019, which led to the closure of one of his businesses. As the founder of Profit Launchpad, he is laser focused on helping service businesses scale past their first $1 million in revenue and get out of the overworking mindset. Welcome to the show, Dylan Jones.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I'm excited about this conversation today for a number of reasons. I mean, we're at the time of our recording, this will air into 2025, but you and I are hanging out right around the Christmas break and, thinking about the end of a year. A lot of people are pushing hard to close the end of the year, whether it's a revenue target, some goals that they set at the beginning of the year. And even if they're just working for someone else, they're often put under these pressure cookers because we have all the family events, we have travel plans. There's 1,000 things happening in the last month of the year. And what I've found is it really puts people under that pressure scenario. Now, having, been forged into a diamond through pressure yourself, what are some of the things that you would suggest people need to be aware of? If we take us back to your story and what was happening for you over these 9 years that kept you hustling so hard?
Beyond just trying to make a living and trying to make a splash in my own career, I think it's just that I have a natural, like a lot of entrepreneurs have a natural and born tendency to just work, and especially when it's earlier in your career. Or this was my second business that we had closed, but the first one was really successful because I worked really hard for all the time that was available. And then the second one, I thought the same. I could apply the same thing, and that turned out not to be true. And so I look back at that not super fondly, but at least I learned a really strong lesson of it doesn't, you cannot work a bad idea. You cannot work poor product market fit. So, make sure especially this time of year, you're working for the right things. Like for me on Friday, I'm logged off until the 3rd. And I think a lot of people should do that. So when you first asked like how to mitigate, like if you have to burn the candle on both ends for the rest of this week, do so, but only if you're taking a break. And I think a lot of people, for some reason, work through this time of year thinking they're going to make, get ahead of next year. It's like nobody of any consequence, decision makers, anything is working during that time. It's like trying to raise money in August. It's like, no, all the rich people, all the investors, they're on break. You're only talking to junior analysts. Like just wait until September. And I think it's the same lesson this time of year is it's a great time of year to slow down, to focus on the big things in your life and business. Focus on one big problem, what you want to change. But like it's not the time to be grinding away, especially over the break. And I just don't see the success in it. I've seen many people try and never really make that splash. It seems like wasted effort.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you identified that. Now, thinking back to going through this experience, I can only imagine being, in the doctor's office when you're being told, like, basically having we'll call it the coming to Jesus conversation that you need to start making some changes in your life. And what was the first kind of reaction that you had when you kind of had that sit down conversation and you felt that, like, were you upset? Were you offended? Were you like, well, how am I going to keep going on? What were some of the thoughts that came up for you when you were told that you really needed to take a step back and start slowing down?
Honestly, at that point, it was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. So I was told I was had there's a slew of things, but one of the big ones was the minerals and my micronutrients in my body were so low that my like magnesium and calcium in my bones was a bit depleted.
Mm.
Not and which was like I didn't know that could happen. But it was just because I've been not taking care of myself for so long. Like, it was weird. I was still very fit and very active. I was skiing and CrossFit and hiking and stuff. But I just was never allowing myself to rest. and have have that time to recover. So I was pretty much perpetually exhausted and very irritable. I remember that specifically being very like struggling articulating myself, struggling to find patience. I was just always really irritable and I was exhausted, right? And I think a lot of people, that's that last emotion we have when you're too tired to be happy, joyous, when you're too tired to be disappointed, just the only thing you have left is anger. And like so you find a lot of entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. They're just kind of angry. And it's because they're white.
Wow. And you must have seen that starting to show up, I would imagine, in your relationships and the people that probably working with you, working for you, and even just like your personal relationships, family members and people surrounding you. Was that part of the reason? I'm kind of curious. Obviously, the fatigue, that there's a natural feeling that knows maybe I should go get myself looked at or checked out. Was this kind of an annual, regular checkup, or did you go in proactively say, you know what, I need to try and figure out and resolve what's going on and how I'm feeling? And is that sort of how this all came about for you?
Honestly, it's because I could have sold that business. Now I would have been selling it for basically pennies on the dollar, but it would have been enough to cover like the initial investment type of deal. I was so uninterested in even going through the process of the due diligence and working with the buyers. And they were, I'm from Vancouver, Canada. They were in Cleveland, so I would have to fly back and forth from. I was so uninterested in it. I just closed, literally just closed the doors. Just emailed everyone, said we're done. Thanks, all the best. Um, and after that period, after legally we signed the closing documents, and I was just kind of reflecting. It's like, man, why didn't I like? I was so uninterested, and like at that point, I was like sleeping a ton. I've never really been a big sleeper. I'm like a 7 hours a night kind of guy at the most, and I was like 10, 11 hours. So I was just white and uninterested in a lot, and that was like a
Mm.
real like I didn't want to do my hobbies. I didn't want to go see friends. I didn't want to be social. Even now, even though at that point I had a lot of time, right? And so I went to the my family doctor, and talked to him and just said like, "I just white man." He said, "Oh, let's go talk to can't remember who the specialist was, but anyways, I did like a blood panel and they're like, your cortisol is about as high as it can get, and your micronutrients are very low." And I had things like you can still see here a little bit on like my beard hair was falling out, and I had lost a ton of weight, and it was like pretty obvious. There's obvious external signs, but the like the real catalyst was just that like uninterested,
Mm.
um, which is super common in people with like depression and things like that. And what I found out is I had like no, see, I can't remember the name, but it was like depression for a reason. It wasn't like a long term chemical depression that some people really suffer with. It was more like just this like acute anxiety and depression from that particular instance. And once I
Mm.
was able to, re-energize, rest, um, find a new purpose, or just honestly just walk my dog a bunch. I started coming up on the other side.
Wow, very interesting. And so, as you started to come back around, again, getting rid of the business at that time, what was the thing that you felt finally created some spark for you? Where did you start to get? Do you recall what was the first kind of fire that began to reignite for you as you started to work your way through that?
Yeah, yeah, for me, it was definitely recognizing I pursued business in the way that I had because that was what was popular in terms of like business marketing, what you'd read in, Forbes and Inc. and but I don't know where else, maybe Business Week or something like that. And you see these guys and like it's always been popular. It's popular again right now. Like Alex Hormozy's like perpetuating it in a terrible way. And I like a lot what he says about sales and marketing, but around what he says lifestyle, to me, he's crazy. And it really showed we are marketed to as entrepreneurs to do things a certain way. And the result is like most businesses fail. And I don't think most businesses fail um, because people don't work hard enough. I think they work too hard in the wrong directions
Mm.
and they don't take the time to learn about how their business works. They don't take time to learn about the market. and like really work into a sustainable business process, right? Most people want to blitz scale because we're all marketed that SaaS is the greatest thing in the world or tech, and that we should all be tech companies. But I was a manufacturing company. Now, like my company works with local services, local trades. They're not, you're not supposed to blitz scale in 2.5 years and raise a bunch of capital to have a $2-3 million plumbing company, right? You're supposed to grow sustainably, build relationships with your vendor partners, and anyone who's been in business for a long time like really knows that is like where do you make the most money? Where do you make the or not even the most money, but like the most profit, the most value? Where do you build the business? Where do you build your long term like accessibility to capital? It's like relationships. And when you're in that mindset of I have to burn it, I have to do this, I have to do that, and you're outside of like Silicon Valley, it's like you don't need to do it. If you want to go build a tech company in 2 years and make hundreds of millions of dollars, um, in Silicon Valley, like by all means do that. But look at the failure rates as well. Before, like, we only hear about the winners, and to come full circles, I'm like, we only hear about the winners, but there's way more losers than there has to be, especially in local businesses. Like, there's so much room in the ecosystem for really well operated businesses, but so anyways, to answer your question, that spark for me was really like, how can I help people? How can I build companies of my own based on those principles, which I've been doing? But then as I build those principles into my own businesses, how can I help other people? And that's where Profit Launchpad came from.
Wow, incredible. Well, we're going to hear more about Profit Launchpad when we come back after these important messages. What is this incredible thing called the Kolbe A Index I keep hearing about? I'm a certified Kolbe consultant, and I can't wait for you to discover what your natural instincts are. It works incredible for teams, for business owners, in families, with our kids. The more you can develop and understand your knowledge of how you go and get things done in the world and how that happens with the people around you, everything can get so much better. Take the initiative. Learn more about how this might show up in your life. As a certified coach, I'm happy to sit with you and help you understand the depth of your own superpowers. Get the process started by downloading my free guide at coachcanfield.com. So we're going to talk a little bit about hiring and specifically why you shouldn't just hire anyone with 2 feet and a heartbeat. Because there's much more to it than that. Now, Dylan, during the break, we were talking a little bit about the importance of a hiring process and something that you've really been able to nail down for yourself, what you guys do at the Profit Launchpad. But what I'm curious about is if you can share with our listeners, what was the kind of impetus of this? What made you recognize that you needed to approach hiring a little bit differently from your own vantage point?
In So when we were just starting the idea of Profit Launchpad, it was more of a fractional COO agency model. In order to deliver high value to these like local service companies, do the implementation for them. I really have stayed away from the consulting, like management consulting model where it's like, here's your report, best of luck type of deal. I remember hiring people those for multiple of my businesses and I hated it. He's like, oh great, I spent 40 grand on a report. I don't have the time or money to implement. Perfect.
The
Um,
report's all past-based information. Meanwhile, the business is going so fast that a lot of the report's out of date already.
yeah, 100%. Everyone knows the model. So the 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 outcome though of this fractional COO business, which was a pivot into what we're doing now with a more platform-based growth partnership, is it's really hard to do implementation as a fractional just means part-time person, right? And what I found a lot of fractionals, unless you are at a $20 million company or above and you're working on a specific project, fractional just means, to me at least, that you are a full-time worker who's paid part-time. And you get in a lot of arguments with CEOs. So I really looked at it as like, okay, well, we're not, the people are bringing on fractionals and people are bringing on agencies and consultants because it's really easy to get pitched by an agency who's got a good pitch and a good offer to fix a problem, but it's really hard to find an agency or consultant that actually can fix that problem on a budget and timeline that fits a sub 5 million local service company, right? So I looked at this and said, well, why is that? And it's because hiring is so crazy expensive, right?
Mm.
So a lot of local service businesses don't understand it. It takes 9 months really to have someone fully integrated into your company. It, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars in opportunity costs and real cash value and lost or productive time to hire. If you make a mistake in the hire, like if the person's not if the first person you pick is not the winner, it's double the cost type of deal. And there's lots of solutions. There's recruiters, or actually, there's some really great recruiters that do find people. There's finding contractors, but instead, we just looked at this like, what if we started hiring people with a purpose of an outcome? And actually, there's a book right behind me on my desk that talks about that a lot. Funny enough, that's not a plant. And so, outcome based hiring and what we do, and ties into our software package and platform as well, is we're hiring rather than being like, you are a office manager, you are a bookkeeper, you are a HVAC technician. It's like, what outcomes does the business need to reach its goals? And what that forces owners to do is build intelligent planning. So we don't do like strategic planning and mission and vision and statements. We pick a vision for the owner, and it's, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to be, a $5 million company? Do you want to be a $20 million company? Why do you want to be a $5 million company? Like, what do you actually want from this business? Because a lot of people go into business, believe it or not, a lot of people go into business without really knowing why. Maybe they just were sick of working for someone, or they were doing side jobs and it morphed into a business. So the first step is that vision of, what does the day-to-day runner of the business actually want to do? What are the decisions in the objectives and the intelligent KPIs that are set up to achieve that? And then what are the functions or the roles or the tasks? Like, there's a million different words to use that need to be completed at above a specific KPI. Then you now have a job description. And that's outcome. That's what we've followed now, is this outcome-based hiring system. So then when we go through the hiring, we have a very strict, like, step-by-step process that takes it. People hate it. Like, I hate it. It takes a long time, but the results are, we find the right people for the right seat. And we find them in like the first time. There's been very few mistakes. And so we've used this internally really well. And now we're rolling it out, teaching our clients how to do it, helping them find the right people. And it's all wrapped up in doing test projects and going slow. Like, that's the thing, is, if for these smaller businesses, these main hires are so important because they're essentially business partners that are paid a salary, right? And unlike what I used in a description before of like a tech company where you're like, I need 40 full stack engineers because we're going into major dev because we want to scale to 100 million users. It's like, this isn't what that's for. This is for that, like, those first 5 killer hires where a business owner doesn't really know what they need. And so they start saying, I need a COO, I need a VP sales. Like, yeah, but what does that actually mean? And that's where we focus on those outcomes. Like, what are the outcomes? And if you don't have the vision and you don't have the objectives picked out on how to get there, then your hires are not they're going to be expensive over a long time as you figure it out together. So this is a way for these business owners to really, like, skip those messy steps. A few of the messy steps. Like, there's still going to be messy steps made, but it's to skip a few of them.
So walk us through a couple of the intelligent KPIs that you might identify, whether it's from your own business or even just some of the clients that you serve. You go through that process, you go down a line of questioning, you get some clarity, you're extracting clarity from the business owner about what these outcomes look like. And then now you're framing that into, like, say, an intelligent KPI. So what would an example of that kind of look like for yourself?
Yeah, the best one I have that I find every single person I talk to, if they're under 7 figures, and they're like, we want to be a 7-figure company. Okay, great. What pick a number, right? So someone's always like, oh, I want to do 1.5 million. I want to do 3 million. And I say, okay, why? Why do you want to be 3 million? Why don't you want to be 30 million? And the reason I go through that process and what we do is, we shine a light on what that actually means. So you're at 600 grand, you're at 800 grand, whatever. Now, to grow to that number, roughly, now if you have like great referrals and network, this might be a little different, but roughly you're going to spend 20% of the target revenue in marketing to generate the leads to get there. That's with the assumption that you've got functional marketing channels figured out, right? Now, if you don't have functional channels and you're just on kind of like you're on the revenue roller coaster, you're on trickle of leads from a friend, referral here, network there, breakfast there. Like you don't really have a functional, consistent lead channel. It could be much higher. So we asked them saying, like, you picked this number of 1.5 million in revenue, but it's going to cost you, what's that? Like $300,000 to get there. Do you have 300,000 in cash today? No. Okay. So we can get there doing incremental growth, but here's our like first thing we have to fix is marketing. We need a channel that works. We need consistent lead flow out of it, and we need to apply a normalized budget to it and be measuring KPIs every month to ensure that's happening. And then we need to replicate it, and we use that bottom level number of how many leads can we generate for the budget that we currently have, and what's our closing rate. So then we go into sales efficiency and things like that. But we look at that as the number to base the future revenue projection off of. So many, it's the one that I actually built a course around it, a free course for all my clients that sign up to watch before they start working with us because it's so common. Is like, if you picked a revenue number, that's probably unrealistic because you have no plan on how getting there other than working hard. So this goes like right back to what we talked about. You can't just work hard to get a number. And across the board, I get big light bulbs, a lot of ahas, and a lot of like happy, like, oh, okay, well, we can do 800,000 this year or 1 million this year, but we can also pull 15% net profit out of that. And it's like, yeah, and if you do 1.5 or 1.8, you're going to be negative 10% net profit because it's going to go all into marketing. And so we get that change in perspective as people really look and go, oh, I can actually make money doing this if I think about it. And that's when I always use intelligent budgeting, intelligent KPIs as a ground level, like what can we achieve to what can we get, rather than just picking numbers. And again, like this is for local service businesses. There's lots of different industries like that can grow that fast with just using, especially like if you're in e-commerce or again tech and you know how to scale ads specifically, you can scale crazy fast, way above the numbers I'm talking about. But local service businesses is way harder because there's a lot of on the ground issues, right? Like there's just a lot of competition, but there's a lot of lack of existence in the local market will prevent you from scaling like that.
Yeah, you have geographic, whether you call it competition or certainly other providers often, and also you're fighting against their other marketing. But then it's a matter of, again, what I really appreciate how you identified. Sure, numbers are easy to think around and to assess, and we can do math on them very quickly. But it's never about a number. It's like there's a video out there. It's not all about the nail, right? It's about what the representation of what that number means. And so, what is the value proposition? Why is this actually important? I think that's the key thing that you're trying to identify for people, for these business owners. And the more that you can dial in on that, the more you can relate what that proposition is, what that meaning for the individual is, and how that connects to a number. Because a number
Mhm.
is just a number.
Yeah, and it puts us like I do it specifically because we aim at our clients to be growth partners. And the difference between that and like a consultant or a fractional is my mandate in my contract is to be as transparent to my client as possible and help educate them along the process of like it's not being pessimistic, but like we can do anything we want as long as it's tied to reality. And that's what we really, really do focus on is, yeah, I can get you to $10 million, but you're going to need like 1.5 million in cash to do it. And that's just the reality. There's always breakouts, right? There's always a guy who's like, oh, I started my business 2 years ago and we're doing $20 million. And it was like, sure, of course there is. But that's 99% of businesses are not in that boat. And that's who I'm trying to work with, is creating those, like, again, creating the sustainable long-term businesses that people can be proud of. Maybe you sell it, maybe you give it to your kids, maybe it just creates a cash cow, or maybe you work it. I don't know. Those are the decisions in that vision process that we go through. And again, it's not to create like a wishy-washy vision statement. It's like literally just, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to sit on a boat and get a phone call once a week about your marketing budget and how it's killing it? Like, we can do that, but a lot of things have to be set up before you can get there, right?
Yeah, I love it. Well, we're going to hear more about some of the ways that you're innovating into 2025 and beyond when we come back after this commercial break. Are you looking for a great book to read? Turns out I have one for you. It's called Cash Follows the Leader. It's available anywhere books are sold, but if you want to get a free copy and you can download it right to your inbox, you can go to coachcanfield.com/cash follows. So you need to hire some people, but how do you even get them to come to work? A lot of people are dealing with these challenges now in this modern day and age. A lot of people want to work from home. Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. If you're a plumber, it's kind of hard to work from home unless you're doing plumbing work in your own home. There's some challenges, especially with local service-based businesses, where they're trying to really attract talent and find people and keep them. You mentioned earlier, Dylan, the investment, the cost investment, the lost opportunity on not picking the right people. I'm sure you even experienced that to a degree in your own business challenges. But why is it so critical for a local service-based business to be able to dial that in, filter people, and get down to the core of who's going to actually help their business thrive? What do you think that? Why is that need so high? And also, how do you go about that process of filtering people to get down to the core elements?
So for the local trades guys, especially, you scale on people in local trades, which is really hard, right? Because you have to scale on that everyone follows the same system. Like a software guy can scale on software. So he knows the software is going to follow the system if it's written correctly. So hiring not for, the flashiest, or hiring for, the best talker, or, the longest in the field, but the technician, or, and again, I'm talking about like maybe higher skilled people, but it does go down into the even journeyman and especially apprentices, is hiring for a person who's like willing to learn, willing to connect with your processes. They're not in that position of like, oh, I've always done it this way. And because you can only scale one system at a time, right? So if everyone does, installs an HVAC heat pump differently, when you go to that point of maintenance, diagnosis, what's wrong with this thing, which will happen, especially if you're in service, and they're all different. Well, I have one guy who can't, he has to take 2 hours extra on every job because he's got to figure out what the guy did before.
Mm.
It's why like home rental companies, which I used to own, have such a hard time comparatively to a new build, because a new build follows a plan. The home rental is like, as soon as those walls are open, it's all bets are off type of thing. So our hiring process was really built around recognizing the right fit for the owner of the company, and so we do things like Kolbe index testing, Myers-Briggs, DISC, et cetera. There's a ton of them, and we do that testing not so much like, I don't really believe in them as great indicators of like a person's true self. And I think Myers-Briggs is based on like nothing. DISC and Kolbe are a lot better, but we look at them as a balance to the owner. So if the owner is like really fast thinking, fast talking, always moving, then he or she is going to need someone who can slow things down, who can think about, how do we actually get that great idea done? Maybe that's not such a great idea. How do we go through the process to figure that out? And that starts with looking at something like the Kolbe index and looking at like energy fits. If you're high quick start versus a low follow through, like you need someone who's on the inverse. And then we go through like a really rigorous process of, and this is different for everyone. It really fits in like how the owner wants, but like how I do it for my company is, you have to send in a video. You have to answer 5 questions in that video. I give you the 5 questions, and it's got to be 3 minutes long. Now, if any of those parameters are not met, so you don't send a video, you don't do the 5 questions, and it's over 3 minutes, like gone, immediately gone. So that would be for like we're trying to find, say, people we really want to follow directions. So to do a process or something like that, right? And then from there, we go into, I mean, there's a book called Who that we follow. You go into the skills fit, you go into a culture fit, and then you go into test project, and then a test project, and then a probation period. I do paid test projects. I don't believe in not paying for test projects. I think you should pay people for their work. And the test project should be like one based around what they would do in real time. And actually, a little hint is it's a great way to get some client work or customer work done. Um, like you still pay for that. So maybe you're running behind on or something. You get someone to do it. You pay them, but you have like a real time look at what they would deliver. And then the second test project would be something that you want to do in the future. So something you don't know how to do, something you're struggling with, and let them think it through.
Mhm.
And this can be, that's more like for a knowledge based company, but it can very well be used for in-field workers as well, and we do all the time. So you again go back to that first thing I said in the previous segment, where you know your outcome, you know what you need in terms of the skills that are like a gaps analysis. You have skill gaps, and you're hiring the people that go through that process. And the thing is, like I get a lot of pushback on people who like, oh, tradesmen won't do a video. It's like everyone's got a video camera in their pocket. How hard is it to put up, if they can't figure out, and like this is why I do it. I should preface it, is every single company I work with now uses apps on their phone, like Service Titan or Jobber. So they're like every single trades job is a unless you're like commercial doing high rises and you just checking in, checking out. But if you're like in a small service company, you are on your phone on apps for that company. So there's a little bit of tech that needs to be able to be handled. And so picking up your camera, looking at 5 questions, answering them in 3 minutes, even for a tradesman, is a very doable thing. And I think a lot of people overthink it. They're like, "Oh man, what a pain in the butt! I gotta, oh, I'm gonna have to be so perfect." It's like nobody cares about that. We just care that you're honest, you're like you're transparent about your answers, and that you do it. And it's such a great qualifier because tons of people hate it and they won't do it. I'm like, great. We try to do our best to pay A wages, and A players, I can tell you right now, do it every time. The B minuses and the C and the D players, like, no, this is too much effort to get hired. And it's like, all right, great.
I-
That's perfect. That's exactly why we do it.
If it's too much effort to record a 3-minute video and ask 5 questions, answer 5 questions, I could only imagine what would happen if the client wanted to, that it goes directly to like servicing or connecting with a client. Clients have questions. Probabilities you're going to need to answer them on the telephone or in person or in some other way. So it seems like a really good way to even identify some of those basic skill sets on how that person will be able to activate in a client sitting relationship, with the people that business serves.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the little hint to any service company who's listening is one of the things I find the most impactful in customer communication and improving it. This is for clients and myself, is dropping a voice note, dropping a quick video of yourself answering their questions. Because it's easy to text or send an email at the end of the day, but to pull that camera out and say like, hey, Jim, I hear your concerns. This is what I'm thinking. I'm sorry I can't get on a call right now. I'm on a job site, it's loud, but here's what I'm thinking. For 1 minute, send that to them. You get some pretty happy customers. So it is very, you nailed it. It's indicative of how that person will work with clients in the future.
Well, and one thing I could see are some of the pushback you might get when you're meeting with clients in the service industry, and they're already maybe struggling to find people. They're like, well, geez, if we put in all these barriers and these gateways to entry, Dylan, how are we even going to get anyone coming through the door? Is that the type of, do you ever hear comments like that? Well, if we have all these steps that people got to walk through, are we even going to end up with anybody?
All the time I hear that, I would very commonly say they're underpaying and undertraining. People who are comfortable, have a living wage or better, um, they feel like they can provide for their family, and you're training them to become better in your organization so that they have a future prospects. That doesn't come out. It's when people are like, oh, the average rate of a third year apprentice in HVAC is, $28 and I want to pay 22. Of course they can't find anyone to work, right? Nobody wants to work anymore. Yeah, because you don't pay living wages. That has been overwhelming my experience. There is the odd job market. Vancouver's a tough job market. There's there for senior guys because they get paid really well. So it's a tough market for smaller companies to be able to afford those guys, and so you have to get a little more creative. But man, overwhelmingly, people just don't want to pay their employees enough to get. It's like you want an A player, they want an A wage, and then you get A work. But if you pay an A player, B wage, they're not going to be with you for long. And I don't care if people think about like, oh, they should have pride in their work and their company. No, it's 2024. There's no such thing as lifers in companies anymore. Like people need to be paid. They need to be appreciated. They need to be trained, and they're going to be with you for 10 years, probably max. And so build your company around that realistic knowledge we have now.
Well, and there's always people looking to transition between these different types of service business. You mentioned the trades. I'm a recovering trades guy myself, so I saw that process. Granted, it's been a few moons since I was in that industry, but I don't imagine a whole lot's changed since I've been out of it. I still have a lot of friends in the industry, and there is a transitional environment, especially when you have larger commercial or industrial projects, massive amounts of manpower versus a small kind of more mom and pop type businesses, the guys under 5 million. And those people are always going to be able to attract the people that are on these bigger projects because they're looking for a different lifestyle and they're also
Yep.
looking for an opportunity. They
Yep.
want to be in a place where they're not just a name, or they're not just a number, they're actually somebody, they're a coworker, they're a person. They can have some influence on the growth of the business, and they want to be able to feel that contribution level.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's commercial. We have towers going up in Vancouver like every 15 minutes, and that putting up fly tables, standing in knee deep concrete in the ripping wind on a bare, bare exposed building in the winter in Vancouver sucks. Like it just sucks. And I'm sure there's guys who love it. I have not met them. I've met a lot of commercial construction guys looking for jobs in residential because of the lifestyle. They're working indoors, they're working on the ground. Um, there's maybe it's as good as money, maybe it's different. I'm not really sure to be honest. But that's very common, and that's where the opportunity is, right? Like that training, and to kind of further answer that question about if you're unable to compete because you're a smaller business, then you need to be able to train. And I think that's something that maybe people have forgotten, or maybe people's never were good at, is finding guys who are journeyman, third year, fourth year apprentices, and training them to be excellent. It's a lot of work, but that's how you build that long-term sustainable businesses, those excellent training programs and bringing people in at a lower wage, training them up to be really excellent employees rather than hiring the guys who are at $70 an hour, right?
Well, and if you want to grow and you want to scale and you want to build the business bigger, but you can't afford to pay at least market or even a little bit over market to attract the people you want, probability is you're underbidding your jobs and maybe your business isn't on a strong foundation.
I was just about to say, sounds like you need to raise your prices.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk about raising our prices in a modern world and using AI when we come back after this commercial break. There's certain moments in our life where we know that things are going to change. That happened to me in August of 2009. My life completely and totally changed forever for the better. I learned about this incredible concept called the infinite banking concept. Becoming your own banker. It was created by R. Nelson Nash. Nelson became my friend and my mentor. I loved him dearly. I now have the blessed life of being able to teach his incredible message, his incredible concept to the people I love to serve. You can learn all about it by registering for a free webinar at learnibc.com. Go ahead, take the initiative, start your learning journey now. So how exactly do we use AI technology to create a bigger, better future, especially if you're in a local service-based type business? What are the things you can do differently, and how can you leverage modern technology to duplicate yourself, or more importantly, save a whole bunch of time and effort. And Dylan, you're working on some projects for your own business in that area and the people you serve. Walk us through what you see as the vision for 2025 and beyond for service based companies.
Oh man, and so the AI is a monster topic, and there's I think we'll just stay pretty general. Is really get it's really easy to become mired in the details, and that's kind of my first piece of advice is if you are a smaller local business, you're like, I need to incorporate AI. You need to sit down and be like, what do I need to actually get off my plate? And I would think like administrative tasks is the best place to start. And not just like replacing your administrator with an AI bot, but instead allowing them to do a lot more of the administration that you do, and like just moving through things a lot faster. Where I see the first kind of phase one AI implementation is not removing workforce or people; it's allowing people to be a lot more productive, and like incorporating some of the tools that just easily exist within Google, like Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, for things as simple as like I can't remember the document name was, and find that. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but starting to play around with those type of tools is a great entry point. And I've been working with AI for about a year, mostly agentic at this point, which is like more complex than your basic um, generative. And it is absolutely mind-boggling the amount of tools that already exist, and then you get terrible analysis paralysis on which tool to use for what thing. What I have found to be really, really successful is talking to like I'm a more like sales marketing type of guy. I'm more creative in my like I want to create something, but I'm not a technical. I don't know code. So I find talking to whether it's a mastermind or a peer group, talking to a person who's more focused in the technical world, but finding out like what's even possible and going down like a really curious path is the best way to get into AI rather than trying to like I must build something, I must become AI today. Is go talk to like even go on Upwork or Fiverr and find a full stack developer and talk to them for an hour, pay them $100 or whatever it would be for an hour of their time, and just kind of throw ideas you have at them and see what they think. That's how I started. Was I now have a CTO, but we started just talking about how to automate this, how to automate that. Like one of my favorite things, I do a lot of client calls, and on those client calls we record them all and through video. And so two things that come out of that, and this is just what we call an AI agents. This is an example. The first thing is it pulls a transcript, and we've trained an AI now, an agent, to go through the transcript and pick out all the to-do items. And then it puts all the to-do items in a Google spreadsheet that's a project management board for the client. And then it puts those same to-do items in an internal board on a software called Monday.com for us. And that notifies my behind the scenes staff. And they just start working on it. They start, whatever the to-dos are, they just start going off. So nobody has to have a meeting about the notes that I wrote down in my terrible chicken scratch on how to get it done. It's like, it just starts going, and and we use these like Monday.com. They're like, oh, I don't understand this. How do we do that thing? Like the other side of that is that the same transcript now gets pulled, and we query the client's transcript if they had any like, oh, that's cool, or aha moments, right? And if they did, then excuse me, the um the AI will actually pull what I said and it puts into another spreadsheet, and that becomes content. So that's the outline for a new script for a new, we do a lot of marketing on Instagram on Reels. Um, and so that becomes the new content script for the reel. It becomes a new, short blog for LinkedIn or something like that, or maybe newsletter. And those type of things haven't really replaced anyone. It's just allowed us to put out a way more content and get working for the clients way faster. And so for service companies, like you're looking at great tools for project coordination, for budgeting, for tracking if you're on time and on budget, and using that type of tool to keep very like on top of everything and using it like a second brain. I would say like I actually have a tab on Chrome called Second Brain, and it is a combination of well, it's just ChatGPT. I'll just keep it there. I don't need to know how complex it is, but if you just start creating like a single thread in ChatGPT and talking to it every day, planning your morning, talking about what you want to achieve, it will learn how you think. It will help you become your second brain, where you can just dump stuff and then recall it later. Hey, what did I talk about that other day? That kind of was sounded like this or whatever. And it will help you recall. It'll help you find resources and do research. And you can use it as an assistant in that way. And that's like $10 a month. So that's another fantastic way to just get your intro into AI. Because I find once you start just working on a single project, then you start having that like further ideation on, well, maybe I can do this. And you just ask ChatGPT, can you do this? It'll recommend a tool rather than being like, I need to make my entire business AI based. Like my entire business is an AI based. We're launching a software and an AI platform for implementation into local businesses next year. And my business is still not all AI based, right? It's a process that you have to go through. Um, I can tell you though, from what I've seen from some of the conferences I've joined and masterminds, it's like if you're not incorporating AI, like starting in 2025, you're not too late if you haven't yet. But if you're not in 2025, you are gonna get smoked by your competition. It's gonna be, yeah, it's kind of scary to be honest.
There's so many people who are doing it, and I appreciate some of the great use cases and the simplicity that you put it in, Dylan. I see a lot of potential for, as an example, you talked about trades companies or companies who deal with a lot of inventory. So whether it's your trades guy, you got your electrician, you got pipe and conduit and couplings and screws and all the different things that you need to conduct that business. So someone needs to track inventory. You need to make sure it's there. There's a manual count process. But okay, now could you see trends? Could you see trends and then also match that as an example with how you're quoting jobs? And then when jobs come through and relative to the quoting, what do you have on hand versus what do you need to order? So like there's a lot of things that can be done there to help start build things, I think, for people in those smaller businesses where there's probably tools for that the big companies have in place that maybe the little guys don't have necessarily.
Yeah.
There's so many key advantages. One of the ones that really came up for me as you were talking is, most people, again, in a service-based business, they often are very focused on, what's the current job and the next job. They're managing people. There's always someone who's the go-to like client service individual. There's frontline people that spend a lot of time with clients or front facing, and often they can get burned out on knowing what to do and dealing with client issues. And so if you had an AI agent that can start handling some of those immediate things, addressing frequently asked questions, pointing people to a resource, learning how to nurture some of the oncoming leads from like Google reviews and things of that nature. Those are all little amplifiers that allow that frontline person to spend more time with already paying customers
Mhm.
and less time, dealing with phone calls that come in randomly. That's not replacing that person. It's actually amplifying their capacity to grow your business.
Mhm. Yeah, very, very much. I'm a big believer in that aspect. I think, and being really transparent, right? Like you go on a lot of websites and you're talking to like customer service, and you're like, this is not, there's something off, right? It doesn't feel like a human. And then you go on other websites like, hey, I'm an AI bot, and my job is not to replace your conversation with a person. It's to make sure you talk to the right person to get the right answer. There's nothing worse than going on a website or going to a chatting with a service person, and it's like, here's a bunch of documentation that's completely irrelevant, but you pinged a keyword. It's like that. I hate that. And like as you said, you can have these tools, but on the other side too, where a customer service rep or a project coordinator is completely lost because they're tired, they're burnt out, whatever. Um, and they're completely lost to what do I do next? Well, if you can train them to then use that tool, that second brain, say, hey, I'm working on this project. I'm lost. Like, where were we? What was I trying to do? It can really help kind of rekindle that like creative brain, get things fired up, get that person working back on, rather than doing what I call like the Slack chat. where like, we use Slack in our business very deeply. But one thing I have to train people really well when we hire a new person is Slack in other instant messaging does not mean your first task when you can't remember or can't find something is to ask someone else. Is to go through like, okay, where is it? Because that interruption, interrupting people's thought patterns is a huge loss of productivity and and it's just frustrating at the end of the day, really. So having that set up so people can think and talk to something else and like have that wash. And we even do it with our clients now where in one of our courses we're piloting the knowledge bases, the AI bot is trained on knowledge base. So people are like, hey, I watched video, 6. I don't really understand minute 3. What Dylan was talking about was kind of confusing. I'm not a numbers kind of guy. Can you explain it? And the bot will be able to explain it to them. The benefit for me is I don't have to explain that thing for the 500th time, but it also allows me to have more time to bring on more clients, which means I can lower my prices. I think that's the way to do business is if you can bring on and service people with a high quality, you can lower prices because you have a bigger scale. Not everyone believes that, but that's how I believe it. And that's how, we're really like loving using AIs is it gives, you can have 1 hour of my time a week, which is what we do now. But you can have unlimited amounts of time of AI time, which is really cool. There's great answers in there. Like maybe one day it'll replace me. I hope not, but you never know.
Well, onward and upward with the AI revolution. And more importantly, I think some things you identified is ultimately the time savings, the cost savings potential that AI can provide, especially for a service based business, the ability to actually create more value for customers. I really think will improve our human relationships because we're going to have AI doing so many things for us. We're going to want to spend a lot more time with other humans, finding out how we can serve and help them even more. And you've been with service to us today, Dylan, for being on the show. Thank you so much for that. For those of you tuning in, stay tuned for next week's important episode when we continue to unpack the incredible future that tomorrow brings as we innovate and overcome.